Greetings all, Ferrari Mount 601 here. For the third time in 2020, the absolutely crazy roller coaster of a year that it has been so far, Race Sim Studio have surprised us all. They started the year off on an unprecedented high with the release of Formula Hybrid X 2021, a ground-up interpretation of the proposed 2021 and now, for the lack of a better term, 2022 Formula One technical regulations. Then, they surprised us with another installment of the Formula Hybrid series, Formula Hybrid 2020, which was also a surprise because, well, the regulations for that series haven't really changed very much from 2019 to 2020, so we all just expected that they would carry over the 2019 car for this year, and we all would have been totally satisfied with that, but nope, they did another ground-up Formula Hybrid release for that car, and here, for the first time ever, Race Sim Studio are turning their attention to the other side of the Atlantic, into North America's premier open-wheel racing series, IndyCar, with this car, Formula Americas 2020. This is the first time that Race Sim Studio have taken on a project to reflect the state of open-wheel affairs in the United States and North America on the whole, IndyCar. It is, of course, the premier level of open-wheel single-seater competition on this side of the Atlantic, and it is an absolutely fantastic series. However, in terms of trying to design a competent and cohesive mod for Assetto Corsa, Race Sim Studio have had their work cut out for them. The car that this represents, the Dallara DW12 with the Universal Aero kit called IR18, which has been the bread and butter of IndyCar since 2018, it presents a unique challenge because of how versatile this chassis design is. Of course, open-wheel racing, for the most part, takes place on road courses, and that is something that goes back all the way through the heritage of open-wheel racing to the dawn of motorsport, really. However, what distinguishes IndyCar from other open-wheel series like it is that they don't just race on road courses, they also race on ovals, and particularly the famed Indianapolis 500-mile race, which happens every year. It's been rescheduled for later on in 2020, rather than having its traditional slot on the Memorial Day weekend, the last weekend in May here in the United States. However, the Indy 500 is going to come to us, and of course, the Indy 500 is an oval. And it's competed in by all of the teams and drivers who also run these cars, these very same cars, on road courses. So, we've got a chassis and we have an aero kit on this car that has to be infinitely adaptable to all sorts of different running conditions and all sorts of different circuits. IndyCar runs at places like Sebring in testing. It's the St. Petersburg, Florida Street Circuit. They run at the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course. They run at Road America. They run at Laguna Seca. They run at Indianapolis on the road course. They run at Indianapolis on the oval. They have in the past run at Pocono on the triangle. It's an oval there, but it's a triangle really. They've run at all sorts of different circuits with all sorts of different conditions, temporary street circuits, permanent road courses, permanent oval circuits. You name it, IndyCar is designed to run there. So, the technical challenge that presents itself to a modding team who wants to design something that is cohesive and competent, it's quite daunting. However, Race Sim Studio have long established themselves as the premier level Assetto Corsa modders. They really are pushing the limits in terms of what's going on with this sim and what's capable of being done with this engine, yet time and time again they come out on top, and that is definitely the case once again here with Formula Americas 2020. Some information, first of all, about what it is that we're looking at. This version of the car, and we have two versions of the car included with this mod, this is the road course spec of the car. You can see here that we have large front and rear wings. This is something that does not at all look too dissimilar from other types of open-wheeled formula cars that we see elsewhere in the world. It's designed to do basically the same thing, to go around corners, turning to the left and to the right as quickly as possible. Some technical specs on the car as we see it in reality. First of all, again, this car is the Dallara DW12 outfitted with the IR18 Universal Aero kit, and this, of course, has been the standard of IndyCar since the 2018 championship. In the real world, this car features a 2.2-liter twin-turbo V6 engine with a 90-degree bank angle, twin turbochargers there supplied by Borg Warner. The engine in the real car is throwing out about 675 horsepower with a push-to-pass function, so it's really up to around 705, 710 or so when everything is really closed off in terms of the wastegates and they're just going for it. But 675 horsepower straight out of the pit lane there. The car weighs 739 kilograms dry. Also, additionally, on the IR18 as we see it, the length of this car in this configuration on the road course is 201.7 inches or 5,123 millimeters. The width of this car is 75.5 inches or 1,918 millimeters. So in terms of the overall dimensions that we're seeing in terms of the wheelbase and the track, very, very close to what modern Formula One is. It's a bit shorter in terms of wheelbase and overall length than a modern Formula One car, but in terms of the width, it is only 75 millimeters short of the straight across 2 meter mark of a Formula One car in 2020 as well. So very similar dimensions. Overall weight on this car also quite comparable to what's going on in Formula One. Overall weight on this car, as we see it here in road spec, 739 kilograms. So again, we are right in the same territory as a Formula One car dimensionally, as well as in terms of weight. We are down on horsepower, though, and also, unlike a Formula One car, this car does not feature any hybrid systems, although they are both turbocharged. They do both have V6 engines mounted at 90 degrees bank angled there, mounted midships behind the fuel tank and behind the monocoque. So some similarities, some differences. However, at the end of the day, they're both designed to do the same thing. They're both designed to go really fast around a racetrack, with the exception that this car also has to do it around an oval for 500 miles in some cases. Much longer than a Formula One Grand Prix in those circumstances. As Racing Studio give us this car as Formula Americas in the road spec as we see it here, slightly different specifications from what the real-world stats are. According to Content Manager, Formula Americas 2020 in the road spec has 660 horsepower, 410 newton meters of torque. The overall weight, though, rated in Content Manager is 845 kilograms. That's significantly heavier than the real-world road spec of the IR18. Not entirely sure if that's just a CM error, but it's different. 845 kilograms gives us 1.28 kilograms per horsepower in terms of power-to-weight ratio, and the top speed in road spec is rated at 300 kilometers per hour. Of course, those numbers are going to vary depending on how you've got the thing trimmed out aerodynamically, and of course, the setup screens, when we get the car on track, you can tinker to your heart's content with this thing. In terms of what Racing Studio have given us as a model, well, as we have come to expect from these guys, we have got an absolutely wonderful looking model, as we see time and time again in every single car that they have ever given us. Look at this thing. Content Manager specs on the road course model. We have 226 total objects, and those 226 total objects are comprised of 349,540 triangles. So we've got a very highly detailed model. It is not the most highly detailed model that Racing Studio have ever done, but it's pretty much in the middle of the pack. I'd say high-mid range of the pack in terms of polygon count, but it doesn't really matter. When you start talking about these high levels of resolution, if you've got 200,000 triangles missing, you've still got 350,000 triangles. So, I mean, you've got crazy high resolution. As you can see here, as we get very, very close in on the model, you don't see anything really breaking up in terms of pixelation. Everything still looks crisp and clean and perfect, as we, of course, have come to expect from these guys. Really, really cool to see that Racing Studio have decided to take on IndyCar. I did not expect them to really look at IndyCar at all, and I know that some of us really have been hoping that they would do it, but they did not announce this project ahead of time. They only announced it to us 24 hours before it was released on May 10th, so really we did not have a very long waiting period at all, but the anticipation was very, very high, and of course, as you've seen already on the channel, I have featured the car in quite a few videos to this point, and yes, there's a good reason for that, and we'll find out what the good reason for that is. But first off, a little bit of a closer look at the model. We will stop the rotation here, and we'll just go into free cam and take a little bit of a closer look all around. First of all, aerodynamically speaking, on the road course spec, you don't see too much different here overall between this and a standard Formula One car in 2020. Yes, it's nowhere near as sophisticated in terms of the very fine development that the Formula One teams do. And this, of course, is all by design. IndyCar, unlike Formula One, is a spec series. Everybody runs the same chassis, and for the most part, everybody runs the same aerodynamic appendages on the car. That's why it's called the Universal Aero Kit. The reason why this is done, number one, it's to close the field down and to make sure that the racing remains competitive and relatively equitable, but also it's done to save costs. a chassis from Dallara, who builds the DW12 chassis. A chassis from Dallara costs $350,000 US. Compare that to the development cost of a Formula One car, which is someplace north of $400 million per year that the top Formula One teams are spending to develop their car. So for $350,000, you could buy a DW12 chassis, a rolling chassis, and then for another $200,000 or $300,000, you've got yourself the Aero kit, and you can go run an Indy car. Upwards of $400 million for Formula One, and about $1 million for an Indy car that you could run for a year. That's why you see IndyCar being a spec series, and it's why all the cars look the same, because they are all more or less the same. However, what we do have on this car, still quite sophisticated. We have got this front wing quite obviously, unlike a Formula One wing where we have a single main plane, we have a double main plane on the front wing of the IR18, or Formula Americas as it is here. But you can see the overall design philosophy is the same. You're trying to create downforce across the front end of the car with the main plane itself, as well as the outboard flaps on either side. And you can see these flaps as they're coming up. They are very aggressively shaped here, trying to get that air to shoot up over top of the wing and start to generate downforce quite obviously. The end fences, though, on this wing, quite different than what we see in Formula One. They're quite large, and they are severely raked, as you can see. That relative forward pitch of the end fence, of course, that's the shape of it, but it is also slightly pitched downward. Of course, that's to improve aerodynamic efficiency, more downforce for less drag. You do see this vortex generator across the bottom face of the end fence. That, of course, is something we've also seen in Formula One for a long time. So, very similar philosophy going on in terms of the front-end design, but, of course, it is a little bit different because, well, it's a different kind of car. One of the other big differences across the front end of this car versus a Formula One car is just the overall shape of everything. The nose is a constantly tapering shape all the way down to the nose tip versus a Formula One car that has a very high monocoque, and then the nose very severely just slants down to the ground to have a very, very narrow nose tip. Here, the nose tip is the same overall shape and cross-sectional area as the rest of the nose structure, and of course, that's done really for crash protection. That nose, as well as the monocoque, quite obviously, is an impact structure, and because these cars race at much higher speeds than Formula One cars on ovals, you need that crash protection, so you need that chassis and that front impact structure to be very, very robust. So that's another reason why the design looks a little bit different. But it's just a very nice tapering edge all the way down from the cockpit to the nose tip. Looks very different from a Formula One car, and personally I like this aesthetic a whole lot better. Across the front end, though, here is the suspension on Formula Americas, and it is a double wishbone pushrod suspension on both sides. And of course, this is very, very similar to what we see on other types of open-wheel race cars because, well, it works the best. You've got dampers mounted topside underneath the bodywork here in the front end of the chassis. You've got your tie rod for the steering, and then you have got your upper and lower wishbones here, and they are braced both front and rear on either side. Very cool. Brake duct here going in to the carbon discs there on Formula Americas, and of course the brakes, very important on a road course, not quite as important on an oval. They run much smaller brakes and much smaller brake ducts on an oval to cut down on drag because you don't use the brakes as much there, so you can save weight a little bit and save drag on those parts. But really very similar designs to other open-wheeled cars that we're perhaps more familiar with. The other thing that definitely should bear mention, have a look here. This device across the cockpit area of Formula Americas and the real-world IR18. What's this? This is called Aeroscreen. Now, Formula One, they made some big controversial waves in 2018 when they introduced the Halo system around the cockpits of Formula One cars. The Aeroscreen, first and foremost, has the same idea in mind in terms of its design. It's designed to stop large objects from entering the cockpit and potentially causing injury to the driver. However, for IndyCar, in designing Aeroscreen, they could not go strictly with a Halo solution because, as it's implemented in Formula 1 and Formula 2 and Formula 3 and every other formula out there, Halo doesn't work. Because when these guys are running on ovals, the sight lines that they're using to try and figure out where they are, and particularly where their opponents are quite different from how they are on road courses, mostly because of the high camber angle on most ovals. So when the drivers are looking up and away, they're looking straight into that crossbar of Halo. So IndyCar and their design team, they went to the drawing board and they came up with a solution that ultimately became Aeroscreen. On the inside, as we can see, It incorporates the principal structure of Halo in that it has that hoop section and that central stay that you can see mounted to the front end of the monocoque. However, it is also surrounded by this plexiglass Lexan enclosure, which does entirely enclose the cockpit. So this means that not only are large objects like wheel and tire assemblies going to be deflected, but other pieces of debris, rolled up rubber on the track, smaller pieces of cars, pieces of wings and things like that, they're also going to be deflected from the cockpit area. And again, remembering that these guys are running at speeds approaching 400 kilometers per hour on certain oval circuits, you're going to need that extra level of protection, and also this adds a whole lot more aerodynamic efficiency to the front end of the chassis in the cockpit area. So the guys actually should, and we haven't seen it in the real world yet, but they should have some increased top speeds at places like Indianapolis due to the loss of drag here. So that is why IndyCar have decided to go for this route, and in my opinion, it has more of an immediate need in a series like IndyCar than in a series like Formula One, for example, because these guys do run at speeds that would make the takeoff speeds of some aircraft seem slow, so they need that protection. We have seen very large incidents and accidents in IndyCar, potentially made worse by debris coming into the cockpit area and striking the drivers. So IndyCar had an absolutely imminent need to have something like this, and they have implemented it in their own way, and quite honestly, I think it even looks pretty good, not only for its protection to the driver, but aesthetically, I think it looks quite nice as well. Moving to the other side of the car here, you can see that we have got the same general design plan as other open-wheelers. We've got side pods here in which we have radiators mounted, and there's the radiator inlet duct, and everything goes black as we go inside there, but radiator inlet duct there. What you don't see on this car versus what you'd see on a Formula One car in this area, you don't see barge boards. Instead, we just have a very smooth and uninterrupted line going into the chassis. As we get back to it, there we go. And then we start to get into the floor area on Formula Americas. The floor comes out here, and then we have basically a reference plane, well, analogous to a reference plane as we would see in Formula One. However, unlike in Formula One, we've got these little ducts cut into the floor. This is just designed to get some air across to the top side of the diffuser as we go rearward on the car. However, there's more magic happening underneath. Unlike a Formula One car, at least in 2020, you can see this big tunnel down here. This is for ground effect, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, IndyCar is a ground effect series. So these cars, despite having the very large front and rear wings, particularly on the oval, on the road course version of the car rather, we have big tunnels underneath for a ground effect. And when we do get to the ovals, my brain getting ahead of itself there, when we run these wings very trimmed out, we actually have entirely different wings that we'll put on this car when we get onto an oval. The ground effect is chiefly important. That is then when the ground effect comes to the fore and the car is generating almost all of its downforce with the under tray rather than with the wings. So we have ground effect in IndyCar. We're going to get ground effect in Formula One come 2022. We'll see how it goes in F1, but in IndyCar, they use that to great effect. These guys can follow absolutely nose to tail through flat-out corners at 230 miles an hour. They do not really lose any downforce when they're following in close quarters like that, and that's why IndyCar has such competitive racing. Hopefully it works similarly in Formula One, but for IndyCar, ground effect has been working incredibly well, and of course IndyCar has been exploiting ground effect really since the late 1970s, so they know how to do it, and it works an absolute treat. Taking a look more at the details in terms of what Race Sim Studio have given us on this car, at the rear zone here, just take a look at everything that we've got going on here. First of all, the rear crash structure, very similar to what we would see on a Formula One car, integrated there with the rear light. Looks very, very cool, and having seen these cars in reality, it looks very accurate. Taking a look here at the gearbox casing, that big hole in the back of the gearbox is where the starter motor goes in to start the engine, just like on a Formula One car. These cars do not have onboard starters. Taking a look at the rear suspension, another double wishbone push rod arrangement. This differs from a modern Formula One car that mostly has a pull rod arrangement on the rear, but this one is a push rod. However, you can see the suspension members are mounted directly to the gearbox. Here is a drive shaft coming out of the differential, either side of the gearbox there, providing drive to the rear wheels. Pickup points for the suspension, little braces here that link up the floor to the gearbox casing because, again, lots of downforce in this area being generated. Very, very nice. topside exhausts here on the engine cover. Of course, this is a twin-turbo car, so that means that we have got exhaust running out of either cylinder bank on the V6 engine. So you've got one exhaust this side and one exhaust this side. You can see that the pipes are split in two. The larger pipe is for the engine exhaust proper, and the smaller pipe is for the turbocharger wastegate. And of course, two turbochargers, meaning two wastegates, which means that, hey, we have got two pipes, one out each side. Honestly, that is how a V-block exhaust should work. Why Formula 1 went single turbo and why Formula 1 went single exhaust is beyond me, because it just chokes the engine, but IndyCar have done it right, and of course RSS have represented that very, very well here. Big gills cut into the bodywork here. This is just to get some hot air extracted from the radiators and also from the vicinity of the exhaust, because being turbocharged, the exhaust running very, very hot as they compress that intake flow, and then it gets shot out the back at incredible velocity. So they've done a great job modeling all of that. It looks absolutely fantastic in my estimation. There it is. Absolutely cool as we pull away. There are a number of skins that are available for this mod, as you might expect. Race Sim Studio, they do release their cars most of the time with a menagerie of fictional skins available, and you can just start to see some of them here as we begin to load them up into RAM. There are some third-party skins that have already been released on this car, but these are the ones that Race Sim Studio have put out here for us. They do look very nice. They're evocative of some of the real-world IndyCar liveries, but of course they are not the real-world IndyCar liveries, because that would be a licensing nightmare. So don't do that. The one that we're running right now, the number 21, that is the skin that we'll be using here today. Also, I promised him that I would do this. We need to do a shout out here. Doing the skins on this car as well as on Formula Hybrid 2020 is our friend Klaas, and he has done an absolutely incredible job with the skins on both of these cars, and here is his logo here. I told you I'd do it, so here it is front and center on the screen. Klaas, he is actually a freelance motorsport photographer based in the Netherlands, and he has some clients who definitely you know the names of, and of course the job of a motorsports photographer is very important, because not only do they convey to us all of the spectacle that is involved in motorsport, but they also do work for the teams and drivers themselves to promote their brands. So it's guys like Klaas who really do a lot of the grunt work in getting the information and the really cool shots to us so that we can all gush over them on the internet. So definitely give Klaas a look. His website is in the description of this video if you want to take a look at some of his portfolio. He has done extensive work with Race Sim Studio as of late. He takes some absolutely wonderful screenshots as well, but of course, given what's going on around the world at this point, both he and pretty much every other motorsports photographer don't have all that much work to do right now. So if you do want to take a look at Klaas and his work, do take a look at his website. The link is in the description. In addition to Klaas being a photographer, he's also obviously a good skin maker. Quite readily you can see the work that he's done on the included skins in this mod, but also you can see these skins that he has also made. So I will call them authentic, although they're not necessarily part of the mod, as you'll get it when you buy it from Race Sim Studio. But he's done this Conor Daly livery, which is patterned after the US Air Force. They've done it in sort of this battleship gray with the shark teeth on it. That's evocative of the liveries that were on some fighter planes back in World War II. That looks really, really cool. In addition, he has done another skin here. This is another real-world IndyCar skin for Rinus VK. I do hope that I am pronouncing that name correctly. A Dutch driver here in IndyCar now, and you can see his livery very closely modeled after this one here, or rather I should say that the Race Sim Studio livery is modeled after the VK livery, but you get the idea. He has also done another livery here for Conor Daly, which we're going to come up to as we cycle through the rest of the Race Sim Studio liveries. Here it is. This is another Conor Daly livery. This is a special one. This is number 47 in commemoration not of, well, Ferrari Man 601. My number is 47, coincidentally. But this one is another Conor Daly livery. It's another United States Air Force livery, but this one is patterned after the livery that was seen on the Bell X-1, which was the first aircraft to exceed the speed of sound in October of 1947, piloted by none other than Chuck Yeager. Conor Daly is going to run this livery in the real world, and Klaas has decided to make it as well. So this one is available on Race Department, as are the other 2 liveries by Klaas that I've shown you. Go find them. They really do add a big level of immersion to this mod to be able to run some real-world skins. And of course, one as cool as the X1. Yeah, definitely you've got to give that one a look. The other thing that we've been remiss in doing so far is to take a look in the cockpit. So we're going to fly in right now. Slowly, it would appear. Slow panoramic shot around the outside of Formula Americas. Just take a look at the wonderful work that Race Sim Studio have done on the model of this car. Starting to approach the cockpit area now. Slowly. Flying over top of the roll hoop. Coming down into the office. And here we are. We're sitting a very little bit high, but for the most part, the field of view is what you get from the cockpit when you drive the car. Of course, everything is turned off right now, but you can see that we've got a steering wheel here. It's going to have an LCD on it that shows you a whole bunch of information. Shift lights, quite obviously, across the top, all turned on right now. You've got the steering wheel. And really, the steering wheel in this car was a point of contention initially on launch from some people because they said, well, how come this doesn't look like the version that iRacing has? Well, this steering wheel is actually based on what Penske run in their Indy cars. So, yep, it is still authentic. Thank you very much. As we look around in the cockpit, though, you can see that we have got the typical accoutrement from Race Sim Studio, including the cockpit surround and, of course, the inner surface of Aero Screen. And again, this is basically the view that you get. Your view is not all that encumbered by that central stay. It's slightly thinner than the central stay on the Halo system in a Formula 1 car, so honestly, I don't find the view to be encumbered all that much at all. I barely really notice this thing. Taking a look around the other side of the cockpit, as we go into free cam, you can see typical Race Sim Studio level of detail all throughout. Wonderful carbon weave across the monocoque and the sides of the chassis bulkhead. The lever here for the anti-roll bar front and rear, very nicely done. Little knob switch there. Another anti-roll bar for the rear end. Very cool. Steering wheel itself, wonderfully modeled here with the carbon fiber texturing and all the little buttons and rotary switches there for different engine modes and things of that nature. Moving around to the other side of the steering wheel, across the bulkhead, and then through the steering column. There it is. The paddles on the back, paddles for the clutch and the gear shift as well. Absolutely wonderful. Steering wheel quick release, just like you'd see on a Formula 1 car. Nicely modeled. And then, of course, the front end of the chassis bulkhead here. These are some ancillary switches for the ignition and things like that. There's the fire bottle, ignition switch. Very, very nice. Little wiring umbilical there going into the ECU most likely. Very, very nice to see all of this. Heading down toward the bottom of the monocoque. Nothing to see in the front end of the chassis where we are right now, but you can see the seat. The seat belts looks absolutely wonderful. Quick release hub there on the seat belts in case the driver needs to get out in a hurry. Very, very nicely done. Nice weave there in the fabric of the seat belts. The buckles are nicely put together. Absolutely wonderful, as we have been seeing from Race Sim Studio basically since these guys started in 2017 with the first in their Formula Hybrid series. Looks absolutely wonderful. Really, really like this car. But coming out of the cockpit now, just one final look here at the road course spec of this car in showroom view. It looks absolutely tremendous. And of course, it drives absolutely tremendously as well, as we shall find out in a few moments. We're going to take this car to another mod that has come to Assetto Corsa recently, courtesy of Lilski, Road America. A very, very highly anticipated track by Lilski, who is probably the best track builder in Assetto Corsa. So we're going to take a mod to a mod, and we're going to drive a mod on a mod, and we're going to talk a little bit about both of them, really, as we are pounding around here at Road America. We will see you there next. Welcome to Road America. Yes, this wonderful racetrack in and of itself is a new mod for Assetto Corsa, brought to you by Lilski. Yes, Lilski is generally regarded as one of the best, if not the best, track builder for Assetto Corsa, and this circuit represents the better part of, I believe, 3 years of very hard work on the part of Lilski. This is probably one of the most accurate tracks that we have in Assetto Corsa. That's including the stock Kudos circuits. This thing is put together with, I believe, LiDAR topographical data that's put together from ground measurements and then correlating that with GPS measurements, obviously triangulated from satellites in the GPS satellite network that's up there in geosync orbit. So this thing is truly a one-to-one representation of Road America, and it's so good that I've cross-checked it with the version of the circuit that's available in iRacing, and I'm doing basically the exact same lap times in the same cars where they do correspond one-to-one with the Assetto Corsa. So this thing is one-to-one at very least with the version in iRacing, which was laser scanned and was put together with LiDAR and GPS data that was available at the time. The iRacing version of the circuit's actually a little bit older than the data that Lilski had to work with, I'm led to believe. So this is as close as we're ever going to get in sim racing for the moment of actually going to Road America. This is an absolutely wonderful circuit. It's probably the best road course in the Americas. It's been around since the mid-1950s in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. IndyCar does go here every year for a race around Road America. It's a wonderful venue. I really hope that I get the chance to go there someday for the IndyCar race. This is also the place where Petit Le Mans has been run. So it's a wonderful circuit. And as we can see here, as we start to fly down from our relative airliner vantage point here, you can see just how nicely everything comes together as we get closer into the draw distances. Lilski has spared absolutely nothing putting this wonderful circuit together. Start-finish straight, this is where one of the places where we'll be hitting top speed, about 280 kilometers an hour in this car. Coming around turn 1, this is taken in 3rd or 4th gear, very early on the gas, and you get a lot of run out here through turn 1. This little kink section downhill is actually called turn 2, but I don't consider it turn 2. This is turn 2 proper, officially called turn 3. A little bit tricky. Pick up the apex curbs and then hard on the power in Formula Americas as we zoom down the straight underneath the Sargento Cheese Bridge, down here, downhill, hard braking down for turn 5, which is a tight 90-degree left-hander. Get a lot of exit curb here, so you can get on the power early, particularly in this car. Up a little bit of a crest underneath the Corvette bridge into turn 6, which is probably the most difficult corner on the circuit to get right. You take a lot of exit curb on the outside and a lot of apex curb here on the entrance. You even have this little extra concrete patch here that's also corrugated just to give you a little bit more cheat room here on the inside. You'll launch the car out of here. You start plunging down through turn 7. You've got yourself flat out when the car is all warmed up and happy. Lots of exit curb here. Down through Hurry Downs, this downhill section before we get into turn 8 here. Lots of entrance curb again, and then a lot of exit curb once again, so you can get on the power early, get the traction working well, because here we go into the carousel, or as I call it, the corner of interminable death, on and off the throttle the whole way through here. Pick up the throttle, back to full throttle about here. Stay away from this inside curbing. That'll unsettle the car. You'll exit here in 5th gear, going up into 6th gear underneath the Continental Bridge, coming into the kink, which is flat out once the car is warmed up. Absolutely incredible. Through Kettle Bottoms, that little kink there, and now into Canada Corner. 2nd or 1st gear, hard over these entrance curves. Lots of room on the exit to let the car drift out wide, then hard on the throttle up through 3rd and 4th gear, through the Bill Mitchell bend right through here. Use the exit road here on the outside of the corner, and then the final corner here, turn 14, wide entrance, clip it in for a late apex about here, and then launch it toward the exit, back up the start-finish straight called the Road America Straight to complete a lap here in an Indy car in Road America. Speaking of America, there is Formula Americas sitting right here. We've got to go through the setup screen on this wonderful car. Let's do that. Obviously, everything quiet here. We've taken the fuel out of the car just to keep the engine noise to a minimum, but our gear display, as always, we've got our 6-speed X-Track gearbox, 1st through 6th gear, your forward ratios there, adjustable to your heart's content, as is the final drive, the final bevel gear, out the differential. These are adjustable to your heart's content, default values shown. Tires, we have 2 tire compounds to choose from, softs and hards, or prime and option, prime being the harder tire. As you can see here, as I select the harder compound, the sidewalls change from being red to black. That is 100% authentic in terms of how IndyCar does their tire bidding. Tire pressures default to 15 PSI all around. Minimum adjustment is 10 PSI, and the maximum is 32. We'll put that back down to default for the moment. Fuel, zeroed out to keep the engine quiet. Maximum fuel capacity is 70 liters, as you can see, and we'll shut that back down.
Aerodynamics. Front and rear wings are what we can adjust on Formula Americas. Default value on the front is 18, and default value on the rear is 6. Minimum adjustment is 1 on the rear and 8 on the front, with the maximum being 20 on the front and 7 on the rear. Brakes, brake bias and brake power defaults to 55% bias to the front. You can go as far forward as 66 or as far rearward as 47. So we'll bring that back to default value. Brake power at 100%. You can bring this down to a minimum of 80% if you so desire, but I quite like my brakes to work. Thank you very much. Drivetrain, these are the differential adjustments in power, coast, and preload. Obviously, default value shown 20% power and coast with 90 Newton meters of preload on the differential there. You can bring the differential all the way back down to 0 Newton meters for effectively no preload, or all the way up to 150 Newton meters. That's quite a lot of preload there, basically a solid rear axle. Similarly, you can bring the differential power and coast down to 5% or all the way up to 100%. So you can effectively have a locked rear axle. If you really want, the car will feel terrible. It will not want to turn. Don't do that, please and thank you. First suspension screen, the alignments, camber toe on all 4 quarters. Remember we talked about the camber, or we will talk about the camber and toe there in showroom view again after this section. Foreshadowing there. Yes, I also recorded all of these out of sequence. Anyway, camber toe on all 4 corners, default values shown. Suspension screen, second screen, the main screen, anti-roll bars front and rear, wheel rates, and ride heights as well for all 4 corners. Dampers, our third suspension screen. These are the bound and rebound fast and slow rates on all 4 corners. Your conventional spring dampers there actuated by the push rods and bell cranks. Suspension screen number 4, these are the heave dampers. So the springs that control the vertical motion of the car. That's called heave. How hard or how soft do you want them to be? What do you want the travel range to be? And what do you want the bound and rebound strength to be? Bump stops, the ultimate travel range limit of the suspension. Here we could adjust the front and rear heave dampers as well as the conventional dampers on all 4 corners. Various steering assist. This is the power steering. Basically, I don't touch this ever. The car has reasonable steering feel. However, in the real world, IndyCar does not use power steering. So if you want this to be heavier, go for it. If you want it to be lighter because you just prefer that, go for it. The choice is yours. Visuals, we can adjust the halo here. Take a look between the 2 windows here at that center stay of Halo. Don't call it Halo, it's Aero screen, but effectively the same structure as Halo. Take a look at it. When I go to step 1, it becomes semi-transparent. Just like in the latest editions of the Formula Hybrid series, we can make Halo on that car semi-transparent in terms of that center stay, or we can keep it as it is by default. You can see the thing, and that's how I prefer to run this car, quite honestly. That about covers it for the setup screen. We're going to go back to default setup entirely, which means that we'll have soft tires on and we'll be full of fuel. And we're going to go into the cockpit and show you what's going on with our instrumentation. So, the car is now brought to life. We'll just bring up our pedals here, put them in the lower left as always. There we go. Here's what's going on with the steering wheel. First of all, you can see that we have got these banks of LEDs in blue flashing at us. That's our pit lane speed limiter status. That shows that the pit lane speed limiter is active. By default, it's automatic in Assetto Corsa. Whenever you come into the pit lane, it turns on. Limits you to 80 kilometers per hour here. When those lights stop flashing, the pit lane speed limiter is off. Pretty self-explanatory. Across the top of the steering wheel, we will have shift lights that come on sequentially, and you'll see them operating in a couple of minutes. On the LCD on the steering wheel, first of all, obviously in the center, we have got a gear position indicator showing neutral right now. As we go up through the box, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then back the other way, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, neutral, and then reverse. There it is, pretty standard. To the upper left of the steering wheel, you can see fuel, and then you see the number 70, and then the letter L. That's our fuel level in liters. Below that, the 3 hash marks there below delta, that is the delta to our session best, obviously showing nil right now because we have not turned a lap yet. Below that, you see MPG. Yes, we're going to have in red there a fuel economy readout in miles per gallon. Below that, last lap. We have not turned a lap yet in this session. That'll show our last lap time. Center stack of the steering wheel, obviously, we got the gear position indicator, and then below that, speed in kilometers per hour. Upper right of the steering wheel, we've got our tachometer. Digitally, 3,000 RPM is where our idle is. Below that, we have tire pressures in PSI of all 4 corners, and the locations of those boxes correspond to the respective location of a given tire. Finally, below that, we have got our lap time just ticking past 11:02 at the moment, And then across the bottom of the screen, you can see water temperature 70 degrees C, which is actually very, very stable considering we're ticking over and not moving. No active cooling on these Indy cars, just like their Formula One cousins. At any regard, though, we've got the track to ourselves. We're fired up. We've got fresh set of tires and a full tank of gas. I say we get going. First off, of course, just get everything up to temperature very, very carefully. I am not using tire blankets. IndyCar, in reality, do not use tire blankets. Therefore, I'm not using tire blankets. And quite honestly, I don't like tire blankets anyway. I feel like it's cheating. So this will just be a quick install lap. Just want to get some heat into the tires before we start to push the car. But already you can start to hear the wonderful sounds that Racing Studio have implemented for this car. RSS have always been pretty good with their soundscapes. However, this one I feel is on a different level. It's basically on par with Formula Hybrid X 2021 as far as I'm concerned. The sounds in that car are so good that I started to use them on the 2019 Formula Hybrid. However, this one is a different animal, still just as good, if not a little bit better. It really adds to the immersion, though, as you'll see when we start to come up to speed properly. Trying to work the tires a little bit at high speed. Coming through Canada corner here, second gear. We'll be in first gear when we're really coming onto it. Any regard, I think the car is pretty much there so that we can start a flying lap. Heavy on fuel, remember. Let's go. Unleashing it for the first time here at Road America in Formula Americas 2020. Coming into sixth gear, starting the lap now. 280 kilometers an hour, coming up to turn one, braking early. We are heavy on fuel, remember, the tires are still not 100% ready to go. Go in turn three on the power, being a little bit careful, of course. Heavy on fuel, tires are about 90% of the way up to where I need them, temperature-wise. In the sixth gear, coming down the infield straight, really. Almost at the back straight, but it's not. Turn five. Onto the Corvette bridge. Here's the corner that gives you a lot of trouble if you're not ready for it. Here, are we flat? Yes, we are flat already. Through the carousel for the first time at speed. What has it got? Kind of breathe out of the throttle to about 60-65%. Coming back on for corner exit. Very nice in fifth gear. Into sixth before we come into the kink. Easy flat, no problem. Car bottoming a little bit there. Got a little bit unsettled. That'll get better as the fuel level burns down. On the brakes hard for Canada corner. Nice exit in first gear. Through Bill Mitchell. And now through the final corner here at Road America. Late apex, get on the throttle. Enjoy the exit launch. Come up the hill very steeply here, sap some of your momentum. The car just powers through it though, and across the line for our first flying lap of 146.998. I will take that. Three on the throttle, there we go. It is absolutely wonderful once this car comes up to temperature, and as you can see, it doesn't take all that long to get it up to temperature. You just have to be sensible on your outlap. And then once it comes up, it is there for you. Now that everything is up to temperature, and although we are still very heavy on fuel, we can start to speak representatively now about how this thing feels and how it's responding. What is it like to drive? Well, as you can see here, it's given me loads of confidence straight away to start attacking the racetrack. And it really is doing that in a way that so few cars do, including some of the other Race Sim Studio open wheelers, including the Formula hybrids in that mix. When this thing is really switched on, and right now we're in the switched on territory, immediately it gives you so much confidence. Immediately to attack the racetrack. It's so composed, it's so centered. It doesn't feel like it wants to understeer much. The biggest thing that starts to set my confidence straight away is when I turn in and the car just doesn't seem to want to respond to me. Not the case at all in this thing. It has plenty of front end grip, very poised. And then once you get mid-corner, particularly in high-speed corners coming up to turn 1 right now, you'll see it's just absolutely planted, no problem. Throttle, there you go. Little bit of a wiggle toward opposite lock as we got back on the power, but really nothing to write home about. On the power again, their corner exit, wonderful. Immediately confidence inspiring, even now on heavy fuel. And as you can see there, you get on the throttle. Try to get on the throttle as early as you can, obviously. Once you get on the power, the back end can start to step out in power oversteer. That is very authentic. When you watch the IndyCar guys on TV, particularly out of those low-speed corners, when they get back on the throttle, almost always they get some degree of power oversteer. That is amazingly authentic. And really, it's the first IndyCar analog in sim racing, at least the first modern IndyCar analog that responds that way. And to see that from this mod is absolutely tremendous. Finally, I can drive an IR-18, be it a look-alike or an authentic recreation under license, as in the case of iRacing. Finally, I can drive this thing in the way that it's intended. These cars love to be thrown around and slid around, and none of the others could do that so far. Look at that. Tons of opposite lock. We still recovered it. iRacing, you can't do it because the tire model's not ready. The VRC Formula North America pack can't do it. Just I think the slip angle is a little bit wrong in terms of where the loading drops off on the tire. But this thing, it's instant confidence. And then once you start to exploit that confidence, it eggs you on. It wants to go sideways. It wants to play with you. And then, of course, you get this great engine behind us, 2.2-liter V6. In the real-world IndyCar series, it's manufactured either by Honda or Chevrolet, depending on which team you're talking about. Both versions of the engine are effectively identical, though. Road course trim. We're putting out about 680 horsepower or so rated here. Real world, they're about 710 or so. But this thing, you get a little bit of stereotypical turbo behavior out of this engine in that in the lower RPM ranges, it doesn't really respond too quickly. You do get that turbo lag. It is twin turbo, so the turbo lag isn't that bad, but you do get it. But out of some of these lower speed corners, it's actually good because this car has so much mechanical grip that when you get on the throttle early, it doesn't immediately respond, and it actually gives you a spare moment to make sure that you've got the car settled down before the power comes in. It's actually very useful. And the sound that you get from this thing, it's amazing. I love the upshifts in particular. Just listen to it as we come out of one. I love the wobble that you get as the one gear comes out and the next one comes in. It just feels like power. very authoritative sort of, yes, you've got the next gear, yes, here comes more boost. And remember, this is default setup. It's got so much grip, it's got so much performance already. The brakes are wonderful. They're not quite as grabby as Formula One brakes, but they're carbon disc nonetheless. Car weighs about the same as a modern Formula One car, but we're down by about 300 horsepower or so. So we're braking from lower speeds generally. So the braking performance on aggregate is very similar. Aerodynamics, though, I mean, it has less downforce than a Formula One car, absolutely, but when the ground effect starts to come in, particularly around now, corners like this, at speeds like this, about 220, 230 clicks, the car just sucks itself down to the road, and you have grip on top of grip. It's lovely. Yep, sideways at 210 clicks, no problem. See, the car will do that. It'll let you play right there on the edge of the envelope, and it just comes back for more. And of course, that's to say nothing for this racetrack that we're on. Road America, it's an incredible place, and Lilski, sir, you deserve a medal for this. This track is so good that Race Sim Studio used it in their launch video of this car that they posted to their YouTube channel on May 9th, I believe it was, as we go a little wide. So if this mod effectively has that de facto endorsement from Race Sim Studio, I think you know what we're talking about here. It's incredibly good. Really, it is. We're going to come into the pits here. Long pit lane here at Road America, so definitely take a little while to get to our pit stall, but as you can see, just on default setup, doing 146s, 145s, and that's with still 40 liters of fuel on board. We have got some accessible performance in this thing. And again, all of this, what you're seeing right now, is just straight out of the box. No setup work, no funny business. This is what this car just does when you unwrap it after you install it for the first time. It is absolutely remarkable what it's capable of doing. And there you go. We've done 8 laps so far. Best time of 146.242, 4.262 rather, easy for me to say. But there it is so far on default setup. It is such an approachable thing to look at straight from the word go. I mean, I know that many of you most likely haven't driven a car like this before because you're more so geared towards what's going on in Europe in terms of open wheelers, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, if you don't know what you're looking at, and to be able to jump into this thing on default setup, sight unseen, and to be within a couple of seconds of a quick lap here around one of the most daunting circuits in North America, one of the most daunting circuits on the IndyCar calendar, that says an awful lot for what's going on default setup with this thing. All right, so back in the pit lane here at Road America, we had our first little, not quite install run, but a run on heavy fuel here on default setup, and we were doing 46s and change, and that's not too far off of a competitive lap time around here, straight out of the box. So what happens when you do actually decide to do some setup work on this thing This is some setup work that I have done already. Really no major changes to the setup on this car apart from taking out a little bit of wing, as well as opening up the differential a bit more. 20 across the board here, 20% power and coast and 20 Newton meters of preload. I probably could stand to open this up a little bit more, actually. And this is just an idiosyncrasy of something that I prefer to do. I like to have the rear end very malleable. I don't mind the rear end stepping out. It actually, I like to drive the car across the front axle anyway. I like it to rotate across the front. It's just how I feel things out, and it's just how I've evolved everything. So your results may vary on that. But aside from that, the only other changes are to the gearing here. We've lengthened 5th and 6th a little bit just to stop hitting the rev limiter there on the back straight, as we were a couple of times on the previous run. And then that's about it. We'll basically try to do a qualifying sim here, put 20 liters of fuel on board. And we'll get back out there. We'll get the tires warmed up, as they're not in the blankets. We'll get the pedals back up on the screen. And we'll get back to it. So, low fuel now. Already, even on cold tires, the car's got a whole lot more agility. Just a little bit of a lengthen on 6th gear just to stop us hitting the rev limiter on the back straight. Other than that, though, minimal adjustments. What shall we do? We are just barely flat there. Through the kink. Tires are just about ready to go. Last couple of corners here, we'll take care of the last bit of the tire warm-up. And off we go. Let's see what it's got. Have enough fuel for 2 or 3 laps. Tires still going through the last phase of the warm-up. Things settling down nicely. And on the throttle early, opening up the differential, has the back end a little bit freer, as you can see there. Now easy flat through there. The carousel, little breathe out of the gas. Grab 5th. Grab 6th for the kink. Pick up the entrance curves, pick up the exit curves pretty heavily. And down through Kettle Bottoms and into Canada. Back end got all squirrely, got to back out of that one. So a couple of bobbles on that lap. Still be an okay time, all things considered. 146, 147, okay. Better than on default, but can be a lot better still. I braked myself. Want a little bit more forward brake bias, I think. And a fuel light at 10 liters. There you go. Those are the power slides I'm talking about. Get back in the gas and then the rear end starts to break free. There you go. That's where the fun starts. Unfortunately, the bobble we had into 3 killed our momentum on this lap. We've got enough fuel for one more flyer. Keeping it tidy through Canada once again. There's 144.892. That's more like it now. There it is. The back end got very squirrely on turn in there. You can see as you start to approach the car's limits, of course it starts to break free more often and in more places. And then turn in through mid-corner and of course still on exit as you get back hard into the gas, but it's still very controllable and even predictable. Still an incredible amount of confidence that it's giving me. Pick up a little bit of rumble strip there on the exit. Cutting in early through the kink there, trying to gain just fractions of seconds if at all possible. There we go. We're securely below Delta now. 144.832, not too bad. Not too bad at all. Basically out of gas. Tried to spin up the rears. Yeah. Got to feather the clutch a little bit more because the rear tires, once they're up to temperature, they have a ton of grip. There you go, that's the spin turn. But, I mean, it's got performance. It's got a lot of performance. We're going to put some gas on board this thing. Anything else I want to do? Raise tire pressures just a fraction all around. There we go. Totally cold again. And again, you got to be deliberate on your outlap. Otherwise, you will kill a brand new set of tires and they will just never come back. You want to avoid sliding the car around. You want to avoid wheel spin as much as possible. You want to avoid peak loading. And then once everything comes back up right where you want it, just go for it. Let's see what she's got. Lots of runoff there. Up some entrance curb in a weird way. Wide of the apex there. Trying a different line through there, trying to keep it tighter earlier on. Doesn't seem to work so well. What we've got here. Half a second down, 6 cents. 45.443. Not quite how I drew it up. Push the braking a little bit. Car gets light right over the crest, of course. Gotta be ready to get off of the brake. Haha, yes, I love that. It loses you time, but I love it when you gotta snap toward opposite lock there momentarily. Wide there. Bit of extra momentum. Unfortunately, it's not the sort of extra momentum that lends you lap time. 44.884. Rear end trying to overtake the front there. Sort of try to control it. Far this is looking all right. The apex curves hard on the power for the exit. Use all of the runoff. Keep it in. Now on the throttle. Lost a little bit of time over that bump on the curbing. Still be under. And of course, this is where you can start to play the game of, well, how precise can I be, and all of that. You can really start to fall into hot lap hell with this. But only because the car is just so encouraging. I mean, it'll do this all day long. Just keep throwing fuel and tires at it, and it will never complain. You'll give up long before anything weird starts to crop up in the car. As far as this is concerned, I struggle to find anything to criticize. I guess the only thing that I'll criticize about it is Race Sim Studio. Why did you keep it a secret? We would have been hyped like you cannot believe to learn that you were working on an IndyCar project. No, I understand perfectly well why you didn't want to tell anybody, because, you know, then we never would have stopped spamming you on the Discord. When's it coming out? When's it coming out? Is it coming out now? Is it coming out tomorrow? When's the release date? All of that stuff. But really, I mean, it is unbelievable. It's so responsive. It stops, it goes, it turns, it does everything. It sounds great. It looks great while it's doing it. It's a triumph. It really is. Total surprise in every possible way, from the announcement to just how amazingly good it is. And it's high time that we got a properly good Indy car in not only Assetto Corsa, but in sim racing on the whole, because, well, the iRacing version of this has been out for 2 years already. However, that car, it's limited by what iRacing has going on in its physics and tire model. I mean, this car will power slide out of slow corners, and that's exactly what the real one does. The iRacing car doesn't do that. The VRC car will do that. However, you've really got to be on it to catch it, because it doesn't have the same sort of latitude that this one gives you. At the end of the day, I mean, and I'm not just saying this because I'm probably RSS's biggest fan, but no, this one is superior. It is absolutely superior to both mainstream versions of the IR18 that we have in sim racing, either from VRC for Assetto Corsa or to the iRacing one. And that one was put together with the blessing of Dallara directly, and using data from IndyCar teams at laser scan tracks, and probably running on team simulators in some cases. So, I mean, it's really, really immense. However, that's just half of the story here. The other half of this extravaganza is, well, there's a whole other specification of this car wherein we take away most of the downforce, at least in terms of the topside wing aerodynamics, and we basically replace it with nothing. We trim it out like crazy, we lengthen the gearbox like you cannot believe, and then we turn left really, really fast. Let's take a look at what that one does.
taking a breather now from our fun at Road America. Yes, of course, we had a lot of fun there. A quick look at the oval variant of Formula Americas here in showroom view. You can see for the most part we have the same car because, well, it is exactly the same chassis, but we have some big differences aerodynamically now. And we also have differences in the engine department. Of course, the engine has been downgraded a little bit from its road course specification. We are generating about 550 horsepower in the oval spec because, well, if you had the full 700-ish horsepower in the oval spec, these things would readily exceed 270 miles per hour, and that would be a little bit too crazy. So we've downgraded the engine power a little bit, but we have taken out basically all the drag. You can see here, compared to the road course specification, we have got a very small front wing on the oval version of this car, and of course this is strictly to cut down on drag. Also on the oval, you just don't need all of that topside downforce because, as we mentioned eons ago in the road course showroom roll, we have a lot of ground effect on this car. The under tray is unchanged in the oval spec, but obviously the top side is definitely getting trimmed out. The rear wing is even more dramatic. We don't really have a rear wing on this car in oval spec. It's more so just a spoiler. And really, when you see these cars in real life, and I've been lucky enough to see this particular spec of the car twice in reality at Pocono, when you see these rear wings, you would be amazed at how small they actually are. They don't really look like they do all that much, and quite honestly, they don't do all that much. They're more so just little spoilers rather than wings. They're not really generating downforce. They're just trimming the airflow behind the rear axle here to try and cut down on turbulence that would be generated by some of that topside bodywork. These little rear wings, they just trim the car out at very high speed, and they also sort of condition the airflow for the cars following behind so that they don't get too much turbulence. And because you can see how these guys can tuck up behind each other on the ovals, they definitely work very well. But otherwise, the car is not changed at all in the rear zone, nor in the frontal zone. You can see, though, in showroom view, and this is very authentic to how these cars appear in reality, you can see how the car is just sort of cocked over to the left-hand side. And when you're standing behind one of these cars in real life, you also see this. But just take a look at the camber angle of the left side rear wheel relative to the front side. That's called stagger. And yes, it's something that they do because on ovals, all they're doing is turning left. So you want this car to just dive into a left-hand turn as effectively as possible without scrubbing the tire across the track surface. That's why they have that camber preloaded into the left side of the car just to get it to lean to the left a little bit, just so that they don't have to work the tires quite as hard. Because remember, they're going around corners at upwards of 220 miles an hour, so we're playing with 350, 360 kilometers an hour on most ovals here. It's very high speed, and it would not take very much at all to destroy a tire at those speeds. It would happen really, really fast. So they get that camber dialed into the car, and you can see visually the effects of that across the way that the car sits. Particularly from the rear, it's very noticeable, but as we come back around to the front, also you can see the effect of getting that camber dialed in. The front end there, you can see screen right, car left. Definitely it is leaning outboard there to the car's left side. So very, very dramatic to see this, and of course you do see this in reality. It makes you do a little bit of a double take when you first see one of these cars set up in oval trim, but yep, they look like that. Race Sim Studio doing a tremendous job even to carry that over here in showroom view. Looks very, very cool, and of course very, very nice to see all of that. But we'll just do a lap or so around the car here, rotating in oval spec, just to give you an idea of the overall proportions. Wheelbase is a little bit longer in road course trim as well, but not quite. It's a difference by 2 or 3 inches. And again, that's just to make the car a little bit more stable at high, consistent speeds. But there it is in the oval specification. Of course, though, we are going to have to drive this car in the oval spec as well. I will say that it's not going to be really representative of what the performance is like on most ovals because they do a lot of pack racing on ovals, so you get the slipstream effect as well, which does greatly improve the top speeds, but still we're going to be hitting around 350, 360 kilometers an hour here as we drive this car around the VRC Southstar circuit, really because it's the only truly good oval that we have in Assetto Corsa, at least in my estimation. Of course, VRC, when they did their version of IndyCar, they built that circuit. They also built a road course, the Alabama road course as well. based on Barber Motorsports Park. But we're going to take this thing to the VRC Southstar Oval, and we'll just give a little bit of a look at what this car is like in oval spec. It's really trimmed out aerodynamically. However, the engine power is down a little bit. The gearing, though, has been significantly lengthened to make good use of all 6 of those gears, so we still do get the very, very high top speeds, although it does take a little while to get there. We will see you at Southstar next.
Welcome to Southstar Speedway. Yes, this is the VRC track that is modeled after Texas Motor Speedway in Texas. This is a 1.5-mile oval. We've got 2 turns, which are called 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. We've got 20-degree banking in turns 1 and 2. We've got 24-degree banking in turns 3 and 4. This is where we're going to be shaking down the oval spec of Formula America's 2020, which, as we can see right here, is sitting in the pit lane, anxiously awaiting our arrival. Yes, there it is. This is the first time that Race Sim Studio have tried their hand at a strictly oval car. Now, of course, the overall differences between the oval version and the road course version of Formula Americas are not all that big, at least not visually. You can see that we have taken off all of those big front and rear wings that we had on the road spec, and we have gone for very small wings on the front and rear here for the oval. They really don't do much in terms of creating overall downforce for us. They just basically serve as spoilers to condition the flow as it's going across the car, trying to cut down on as much drag as possible, but really to minimize wake turbulence for the cars behind us. So that's really more or less the rationale for the wings that we have here. As you can see in the setup screen, we have the same setup options that we had on the road course spec, but they are allocated very differently in terms of where they are, both at default and their overall range of adjustment. Here, first through 6th gear, we still have 6 ratios in the box, but you can see that we are geared to do 359 kilometers per hour here at default. So, yes, we have definitely got ourselves quite a bit more straight line speed potential here, of course at the expense of not being able to accelerate very quickly, but it's not really all that important on ovals. Tires, gone are the 2 compounds, and now we only have the hard compound, which is a different hard compound from what you get on the road course version of the car. This is a very robust tire because it's got to deal with a lot of force for a long time, especially around banking like this. Fuel capacity and everything else about the car, though, is still the same. You still have the ability to adjust the front and rear wings from 1 all the way up to 24 on the front and from 1 all the way up to 12 on the rear. Brakes and everything else from here on out is exactly the same in terms of the parameters that you can adjust, including the aero screen there. You can hide that center stay if you so desire. We're going to go completely to default setup here. We'll see what we've got. We've got 70 liters worth of fuel on board, so the same default fuel level as you get in the road course variant, because it is the same chassis. Nothing else has changed about the core structure of the car. It's all peripheral stuff and suspension stuff. So back in the cockpit, it is exactly the same sort of view that you got from the road course version. There's nothing at all different in the cockpit or around it, nothing at all different about how you interface with the car. It's just about how it performs here on the oval spec. So default setup, 70 liters of fuel on board. Let's go. Very long gearing here, so we'll have to slip the clutch quite a bit. And there we are. You can see just how long the gearing is. Third gear down to 7,400 RPM. We'll just come up to speed here gradually. But up on the back straight now. Fourth gear at 300 kilometers an hour. 315, 320. Fifth gear. 340 into turns 1 and 2 for the first time at speed. No problems. 345, 6th gear. There's 349 on the back straight, coming down now. Lap time of 24 seconds, 0.874. This lap should be a little bit quicker. Quick downshift into 5th. 6th gear, fifth. Sixth, 24.620. So about 24.5 seconds is where we're going to be running on this fuel load on fresh tires. And you just drive it between 5th and 6th gear the whole way. You can really pretty much leave it in 5th for most of the lap and not have too much trouble with it. You will eventually hit the rev limiter. And of course, remember, running alone here, we do not have the benefit of having a slipstream, which of course is something that you'd get in an actual race situation. And it's something that the setup is designed for, as is the whole configuration of the car, really. So you will get more straight line speed in a draft, quite obviously. However, here we're not able to achieve that ultimate in top speed simply because we have to push all the air out of our own way. But here on default, the car feels very, very stable, having done a handful of laps now. Everything is up to temperature and pressure. Obviously, you can see a discrepancy between the right-hand and left-hand side tire pressures, as you would expect. All the loading being transferred to the right-hand side of the car through these left-hand corners. But really, as the run is starting to progress here, the car feels very stable. We burned off 10 liters of fuel already, and we're just flat all the way around here. And as you can see, you can start to settle into a rhythm pretty easily with this thing. Just very, very small movements of the steering wheel. I just running it between 5th and 6th gear. Tire's starting to wear in a little bit. And of course, without any opposition out here, it's all pretty academic. There's not a whole lot going on, quite obviously. Car feels fine. Nothing to worry about at all. But just generally speaking, that's what this thing does around an oval. Very stable. Just absolutely stable as a rock. No problems. Obviously, being smooth as your friend, you don't want to be putting in really exaggerated steering angle on this thing. But really, to get a better sense of how this car runs on the oval, you got to run it with other cars. Now to 80 clicks for the speed limit. See just how long the gearing is. 5,500 RPM at the pit lane speed limit in first gear. That is some very long gearing indeed. But yeah, there you are. Off the banking now and stopped at the end of pit lane. Yeah, it is very stable on the oval. We're going to trim it out a little bit more and see how it runs with absolutely no wing angle dialed in. But, you know, what you saw just then is pretty much what it does. And also, I just want to point out here the stagger that we talked about in showroom view. There it is. You can see that left front wheel, screen right, from our perspective here, you can see how it is angled out relative to the rest of the car. And, of course, you can see the same on the rear. That left-hand side wheel is definitely tilted out there a little bit. And now, of course, you can see the rain light merrily flashing away as well. That's it's a rain light on the road courses. It is a caution or a pit lane speed limit light on the road courses. Oval racing does not happen in the rain for obvious reasons, but when a yellow flag is thrown, and there are no local yellows in oval racing. When a yellow flag comes out at any point on the circuit, it is automatically a full course yellow. So that light comes on. That's turned on by race control. So it's just another bit of information that the drivers have to look for if there is a caution, and they immediately need to start yanking on the binders, get the thing slowed down. So just another little bit of safety considerations brought in by IndyCar, and of course RSS doing a nice job there on that light, both in terms of its location and the way it looks, but the way that it flashes and the brightness that it has here, very true to life. I've seen that flashing in my face in real life. It is blindingly bright. So yes, very nicely done there by Race Sim Studio. Awesome detailing on this car, as you would expect. Let's get this thing trimmed out. All right, so back to the pits here, and I've applied a setup that I have put together here for the oval spec of the car. A little bit longer gearing, and this is just trying to get a little bit more straight line speed because we have taken the wings down to their minimum levels, 1, front, and rear. So we'll get a little bit less drag, and we'll get a little bit more straight line speed. Obviously, if I were going to be racing this right now, I would want to extend 6th gear even more because I'd anticipate getting more straight line speed than that even in the draft. As if 381 kilometers an hour is somehow slow, yeah, I may even on a hole shot with a good slipstream from a couple cars in front, I may be flirting with 400, believe it or not, in this car. That's how quick this can be, and ultimately, if we want to go absolutely crazy, we can gear this thing up to the maximum of 535 kilometers an hour. That's never going to happen, quite obviously, because you'd have to be in a vacuum. But theoretically, that's what's possible with this thing. The other thing I'm going to do is I am going to raise the tire pressures on the right-hand side pretty significantly, and at the same time lower the ones on the left-hand side a little bit as well. Assetto Corsa doesn't have the ability to have asymmetric setups as default, so if you want to do something like that, you can do it manually later on. So basically, you'd want to try and emulate that stagger effect as much as you can on this car simply because of, well, we're turning left and only left. So we'll leave it at that for the moment, just trying to do it with tire pressures. I suppose if you wanted to try and get a little bit more weight transfer to the left-hand side, you could actually raise the ride height on the right-hand side. So, for example, if we wanted to raise the ride height on the right rear as well as on the right front, you could do that, but again, it's going to be a situation of results may vary significantly if you wanted to try that kind of thing. Because again, as you can start to see here, the car starts to get even more asymmetrical, and then, well, all bets can be off if you get this wrong. But we'll put some fuel on board, not a lot, but we'll put 25 liters on board. Sounds about right, and we'll just see what this thing does at that point. So in the cockpit, see what it's got. Very different sort of sound rolling up through the gears there with such long gearing. Fourth gear at 320. Fifth gear at 357. And you can see the rather large discrepancy already in the tire pressures left to right. A 20 psi higher on the right-hand side. That'll continue to increase as the tire temperatures go up. Didn't need 6th gear there. And this setup is 3/10 quicker. Remember, we've got a whole lot less fuel on board now as well. Starting to get a little bit of understeer already, though. We'll have to watch that. Could well be overheating the right side tires. See what it does. All right, seems to have stamped itself out. Could have been a little bit high on my marks there. Really tucks down into 3 and 4 with the 4-degree more severe banking. But really, turns 1 and 2 right here. This is how steep Zandvoort is through the last corner. Just put that into perspective. Look at that, 60 PSI on the right front. .23.482, best lap of the session. So this setup is quicker. Just flying it along here in 5th gear. Like flying the world's lowest flying aircraft. It's very gradual corrections necessary. And will improve by fractions as the fuel burns down, of course. Oof. Well, that caught me completely by surprise. Did we lose a tire, or did the thing just crash? I don't know. I've got no engine. I have no control over the car. I've got brakes. I have no steering, really. All right. I'm not entirely sure what happened there. Huh. Did I lose a tire, or did the car just wash out and I didn't react fast enough? I don't know. I don't think I lost a tire. Okay. I don't think I lost a tire, but there is the chance to look at the damage effects or lack thereof on this car. You can see the front suspension is completely knackered. The wheels are straight ahead, and yeah, the toe angle on the right front at very least is completely mangled. All right. Yeah, so that happens. That happens if you get it wrong. This is now making me a little bit curious. What are the tire temperatures doing? Because I just want to know. No tire blankets, of course, as I'm furiously scrolling through the apps here to see what the tires are doing. There we go. Let's put that in the upper left. What are they doing? Stone Cold, of course. Let's see what they do, because I'm now just curious for my own sake. What does this do? Getting into the red zone there at 50 PSI. They go 10 PSI higher than that once they're fully up. A lot of loading on that right front, as you would expect. Right front's up. Right rear's coming there. And you can see what the temperatures are starting to do in degrees C. Starting to get very hot. I'm not entirely convinced we didn't burst a tire. I mean, the car didn't seem to react that way. There was no sudden turn to the right. It just more so got into the wall on its own accord, probably because I didn't turn enough. At 59 PSI, and I think that's where it stops measuring tire pressure. I think 60 may be the absolute limit for the sim. You can see the right front getting hotter and hotter. Core temperature's up to 127 C. That's very hot. .60 PSI indicated, so it can go to 60. Can it go above 60 is the question. 130 Celsius indicated on the core temperatures. The straights do allow the temperature to recover downward a little bit. But did the tire blow, or was it just me making a mistake? I don't know, honestly, at this point. And you can see the difference, though, in the temperatures of the right side versus the left side. Only now the right sides are just starting to get into their proper working range. Left sides have already pretty much went beyond it. 60 PSI indicated. Core temperature on the right rear hasn't moved from 100 C. 101, 102. And again, that right front is the concern. 60 PSI indicated. Getting over 130 C in the corners. I'm not entirely convinced we didn't blow the tire and somehow it wasn't indicated on the MFD, the damage indicator. Doesn't quite make sense to me. It might have been just a driving error. If we can reproduce it. Well, that tire temperature is remaining stable between 125 and 130 C on the right front, which is where I was concerned. Doesn't seem to be going above 60 PSI. I don't know if that's because it's off scale high in terms of what the physics engine can do, or if it's just truly stable at 60. I'm inclined to believe it is because of what the core temperatures are doing. Bit of a twitch there mid-corner. Fuel light. We didn't get a fuel light last time, did we? So this run's been longer. So far the tire's holding together. It's wearing like crazy, but so far it's still there. I don't know, I think we're okay. I think we are okay on that tire. I don't think it blew. It was just my error. Yep, just had to be my mistake, which I am perfectly capable of owning up to. Just tag the wall and, well, things happen when you're doing 230 miles an hour. Yep, does not appear that we can reproduce what happened. Was not a tire failure. Willing to confirm that. Let's hit the brakes way too late, why don't we? And we get into auto braking, and it almost causes us to hit the wall. But that's okay. See how quickly the tire temperatures come down now. Yep, and they will start to tick back down to ambient slowly. But yeah, there it is. I didn't expect to do a little bit of post-mortem analysis there to see if we lost a tire, but we did, and I don't think we lost the tire. A little bit of ad hoc science there. Couldn't reproduce a failure on a tire because apparently we didn't have one. It was my fault. Totally willing to accept that. But yeah, that's actually the first time I've crashed this car. I've been driving it for a week already, and that's the first time I've crashed it. So it just goes to show you how approachable this is and just quite frankly how good it is because it's so rock steady on default setup even. Whether it is on the road course or here in the oval trim, it is amazingly approachable. It's so good at what it does, and it does a great many things. We mentioned off the top about this car's versatility. I mean, this place is about as different as you could get from any road course in the world, and yet still it conquers everywhere. It's great. I've only raced this car a couple of times, once on a road course and once here actually at Southstar, but it's been absolutely wonderful to race. I found the AI to be really smart in terms of what they do, the risks that they take, and the sorts of reactions that they have to you. They give you space. They will attack. They will defend, but they do it fairly. It's very nicely done inside and out, both with the car and the modeling and the texturing and the sounds and the physics and the AI. It's absolutely wonderful. I would say that the only thing more that Race Sim Studio need to do at this point for us, make Indianapolis. Make a mod of Indianapolis. Yes, that would be absolutely fantastic. Call it RSS Speedway or something. But, yeah, that would be absolutely fantastic. And knowing Race Sim Studio, they would probably go absolutely crazy making a track mod. So I seriously doubt that we'll ever see that. But if you do want to make a track, give us Indianapolis and we can run this thing really properly. Not to say that anything is wrong about Southstar. It is the best oval that we have in Assetto Corsa, in my opinion. But if you want to do something a little bit special, Race Sim Studio, make Indianapolis. That would be really, really cool. However, that whole extravaganza was the review of Race Sim Studio Formula Americas 2020. We've got two versions of the same car, road course and oval spec. Both of them are absolutely sublime. They're a hell of a lot of fun. They do everything that you want. They don't do anything that you don't want. They're so approachable on default setup. At the same time, they're very highly tunable. They're very responsive to changes in driving style. And, of course, over longer races, things like that are going to happen. You got to save fuel, got to save tires, change your pit strategy, all that kind of thing. The car is going to be there. It's going to do it. Very adaptable, very versatile, and it's very rewarding to drive because it is just so very nicely dialed in straight from the word go. The sky is the limit in terms of how you want to play with this thing. Really, hats off once again to Race Sim Studio. You've delivered a fantastic product yet again for I don't know how many cars you've done already, 20, something like that, 25th or so time that you have delivered an absolutely fantastic product. Yes. If you don't have this car by this point, definitely go get it. Link in the description to the Race Sim Studio website, whereby you can be linked to their store and you can go purchase this car. As with every other Race Sim Studio mod, it's not going to break your bank. However, I do highly recommend that if you really appreciate these guys and the work that they do, consider paying a little bit extra for this car, should you choose to buy it, as well as for any other product that Race Sim Studio have put out there for purchase. They really do a fantastic job. They continue to breathe new life into Assetto Corsa by allowing us to explore all sorts of different situations and different race cars and different venues. So really, they have made this sim what it is today. So if you can appreciate them a little bit more, please consider doing so. However, that's all I have for all of you today here. Ferrari Man 601ville. Yes, Sim Studio, hats off to you. You did a fantastic job once again. As always, though, hot laps are to follow both from Road America as well as from here at Southstar. Stay tuned for those. You can hear these cars running in full song without having to listen to some guy screaming at you the whole time. So do stay tuned for the hot laps, everyone. Until next time, though, Ferrari Man 601 saying thank you all so much for watching. Continue to stay well and continue to stay safe. And together we're going to fix this crazy world of ours. Stay tuned for the hot laps. Ferrari Man 601 saying thanks. And of course, we will see you soon.